today's latest edition of our electoral map.
Well, Britt, it is time for our final look at our Electoral College scorecard. Heading into tomorrow's election, there have been several key shifts. This race now tighter than it's ever been before. Good news for Clinton supporters when it comes to Nevada. It moves from toss-up to leaning Democrat. But the four other shifts we see tonight all work in favor of Donald Trump. Will they be enough? We'll get to that. Three key states are moving from toss-up status into the leaning Republican column: Arizona, Iowa, and Utah. In addition, North Carolina, you see it there, it shifts from leaning Democrat to toss-up status. So now let's look at the totals. The dark red, solidly GOP states through the middle there, they account for 116 votes. The leaning GOP states add another 99. They combine for a total of 215 in Donald Trump's column. The toss-ups in yellow, including Florida, that huge prize with 29 votes, they all account for 49. The dark blue, solidly Democrat states bring in 182 votes. The leaning Democrat states now account for 92. Combine those for a total of 274 in Clinton's column. So while this map shows numbers tighter than they've ever been, Trump is left with the same assignment he's had all along if he hopes to win on Election Day. Hold all the solid and leaning GOP states, pick up all the toss-ups in yellow, and he's got to pick off at least one state that now leans Democrat. We'll see tomorrow if he can do it, Britt.
Shannon, thank you. There's also a new Fox News poll out tonight, which is roughly in line with the national polling average. It shows Mrs. Clinton with a 4-point lead in a two-way race, as you can see, and a 4-point lead in a four-way race. Let's get some thoughts now on the polling from Scott Jennings, who did political analysis for the George W. Bush White House. Scott, welcome. Nice to have you with me here.
Good evening.
Your thoughts tonight on what you're seeing?
Well, we're seeing the national polling averages come in line with each other. All the tracking polls, save the Investors Business Daily and the USC poll, which we've talked about before, have come in line to show a 3 to 4 point lead for Hillary Clinton. There's some belief that maybe there's herding going on where pollsters try to get together at the end, so nobody's a true outlier. But it looks like she's got a bit of a lead in the national tracking. The question is whether that lead is carrying over to the states, which sometimes lag the national tracking. We are seeing some state polls that look a little different than the national polls.
Right. Well, and the map that Shannon just outlined for us shows Mrs. Clinton with, if everything holds as it appears, with just 4 votes more than she'd need to be elected. That's the lowest total I think we've had on our map in some time, if not since we started doing it. So that is a distinctly different picture than we're seeing with the national polls.
And that's right. And a couple of states are on a knife's edge. Florida is a true toss-up. North Carolina, a true toss-up in the last polling there. We've even seen some polls out of Pennsylvania tonight showing Trump with a 2-point lead. 2 surveys came out tonight showing Trump up with a 2-point lead in both of them. So we've got several states that are on a knife's edge. She's ahead right now, but if you lose any one of them, now you're back down below 270, and you've got to start winning some of the pure toss-ups on the map.
Yes, let's talk a little bit about Pennsylvania, because it's been kind of a garden of dying hopes for Republican presidential candidates in the past. When there seems to be late movement in the Republican direction, this has happened cycle after cycle, it seems to me, and the candidate goes in, right, rushes in, sets up an event, campaigns a bit, leaves with some optimism, and then on Election Day it all gets crushed. What do you think there's any reason to doubt that will happen again this time?
Clearly there has been some tightening because both campaigns have spent time and money there late. It's part of her firewall. If she wins it, along with North Carolina and Florida, this race is over. If he wins it, he's still in business. Maybe not quite over the top, but winning it does definitely open up a lot of doors for him. I do think it's tighter than people thought it would be.
Yeah, we're just looking at the average here now, Scott, and it shows less than a 2-point lead for Mrs. Clinton. That's the average of all the current polls. So that does look pretty close.
And this is one of those states without early voting, so it's hard to read the tea leaves here like we can in Nevada or Florida or some other states.
Right. Now, let's talk a little bit about Mr. Trump's day. He was in Michigan, will be in Michigan tonight. Michigan is, 1988, 28 years ago since it last went Republican. That's quite a challenge, I would think. But he's going to need, for him to win, he's got to, you point out, he's got to, or Shannon has pointed out, we've talked about this, he's got to run the table of the states that Romney won. He's got to win the toss-up, short.
The three's got to pay at the 270. If he wins everything that's on the board on the map right now, he's still short. Those 3 states have the demographics that seem to lean toward his candidacy more than other states in the southern part of the United States, Arizona, Florida, for instance. So Ohio is trending Republican. Michigan's a lot like Ohio. if he can flip Ohio, which looks likely tonight, then there is some belief there that he could do it in Michigan. And they're looking at absentee data in Michigan. Absentee voting is up, but it's down in the city of Detroit, where you have a lot of traditional Democrat votes in the African-American community. So I don't know that it's polling as much as gut feel, demographics, and absentee data that says that the Trump campaign, this might be a place.
You know, I must say, I've been on a lot of presidential campaigns, and it is customary at the end to see big crowds, even for candidates who are way behind. I remember being with Walter Mondale in 1984 at the end, and we had these enormous crowds, and it certainly put a little spring in his step, although I don't think he ever really believed he was going to win. Trump's a little different in the sense that he's had these enormous crowds throughout, going back into the primary season. He plays with these enormous crowds. Scott, in your experience, can you think of a time when a candidate has had this kind of crowd attention and admiration when it didn't end up meaning anything in the end?
He has had big crowds. I was standing on stage in Westchester, Ohio in 2012, right at the end of the race when Mitt Romney had 30-something thousand people at a Kid Rock concert, and it felt there for a few hours like, how could you lose? And big crowds do give energy to a campaign, but they don't necessarily translate into winning. Losing campaigns frequently have large crowds, so I would trust the polling and the data analytics more than the crowd sizes. But truly, he does have a committed base, and that's why we've seen him weather some of the storms, like the tape, for instance. He never really dipped that low because his committed core supporters, the ones at the rallies, keep showing up.
Now, let's talk just a little bit about tomorrow night. So I'm an ordinary guy. I'm sitting at home. I'm turning on the television. I'm interested. Polls are starting to close across the country. Where should I be looking most of all?
First is Florida. If he wins Florida, Trump wins Florida, he's in business. If Hillary Clinton wins Florida, it's an early night. Then North Carolina. If Donald Trump wins North Carolina, still in business. If she wins it, real long road for Donald Trump. Then Ohio, the one we think he's going to flip. If he flips it, in business. Iowa, we think he's going to flip that one as well. Early on in the evening, you will see a couple of red states fall. Kentucky and Indiana will likely go first.
Right.
And we'll see those go to
Trump. Yeah.
We'll go to Trump right out of the gate. But Florida's the one. If she holds him off in Florida, it's over early.
All right, Scott, good to have you. Thanks for all of
Thanks, Britt.
Great help to us. Donald Trump's final day on the campaign found him racing up the eastern seaboard, as we've talked about, to 4 different states with a late stop planned in Michigan tonight. In just a short time, he will be in New Hampshire, which is where we find Fox's campaign Carl Cameron. Hi, Carl.
Hi, Brett. Laser show is in store for the folks here at the Trump rally in Manchester, New Hampshire, home of his first primary victory in the nomination run. And the whole schedule today, it not only reflects what Trump's strategy is, but it really reflects what you were just discussing a moment ago. Trump started his day in Florida, a must-win state. He's been campaigning there very, very aggressively, with a particular emphasis on the I-4 corridor, a huge concentration of voters there. It's often said, as goes the I-4 corridor, Interstate 4, which goes from Tampa on the Gulf Coast to the Daytona Beach on the East Coast. Whoever wins that can win Florida. That's where he began his day. From there, he went to North Carolina. That's a red state. He has to defend it. If he loses Florida and he loses North Carolina, as you just heard, it could be devastating. That's why it was his first 2 states on this last campaign day. From there, he just wrapped up a short while ago a big rally in Pennsylvania. He's had big crowds, more than 10,000, 15,000 people in all of them. In Pennsylvania, he's had a bit of a rougher road there. Lots of eager conservatives, but Hillary Clinton had been leading in a lot of the polls for quite a considerable amount of time. From Pennsylvania, that event just wrapped up in Scranton. Now he comes to Manchester. Not a lot of electoral college votes here, but a very, very big population of independent voters in the Granite State. And that'll be a big indicator tomorrow night. If Trump brings in a lot of new voters outside of the Republican base that he's had in many other states, New Hampshire will be potentially a bellwether in that regard. And then from here tonight, he's going to have what is likely to be now a midnight rally in Michigan. And Michigan is one of those blue states that for many years has been voting Democrat. Likewise, Minnesota, where he visited just yesterday, at the expense of a Wisconsin event, as a matter of fact, over the course of a weekend. Another one of those states where he's got to win. So Michigan tonight really is his backdrop on the final day of full campaigning before the actual election day, is his opportunity, as it's been all day long, to say, Democrats, independents, come along. And he is doing very much that, arguing that his is a movement, which he's been saying for quite some time. But for the last couple of days, Brett, Trump has been saying it's the greatest movement in the history of the United States. A little bit of grandiosity from the first-time billionaire candidate as we wind down and start counting the votes tomorrow. Brett?
I'm sure Carl, it feels pretty big to him. Thanks for all you do out there, Carl. Good job.
Thanks, Brett.
Hillary Clinton started her final campaign day in Pennsylvania, then headed to Michigan. And she's back in Pennsylvania for a rally in Philadelphia with some very big-name guests before she heads to North Carolina. Wow. Fox News correspondent Jennifer Griffin is at Philadelphia's Independence Hall. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Britt. Well, the campaign hopes to end on a high note here in front of Independence Hall, where, of course, the founding fathers lay the groundwork for the republic. Earlier tonight, we confirmed that the campaign had sent a cease and desist order to broadcast networks, telling them to stop running ads suggesting that Hillary Clinton was still under investigation by the FBI. Clinton, for her part, preferred to focus on her closing arguments.
We have got to rise above all of this hate-filled rhetoric, all of these insults and scapegoating and finger-pointing and insulting. I want to be the president for all Americans, not just some. I want to be the president for those who vote for me and those who vote against me. I want to represent everybody.
She began the day at home in Chappaqua, FaceTiming her granddaughter as she boarded her campaign plane for the last day of campaigning. She sent her biggest surrogates to typically blue Michigan.
You have the chance to reject a coarse, divisive, mean-spirited politics that would take us backwards. You can elect a leader who spent her entire life trying to appeal to the better natures angels of our nature. You have a chance to elect our first female president.
Clinton herself stopped in Pittsburgh, then Grand Rapids, Michigan. Clearly, by President Obama, as well as Bruce Springsteen and John Bon Jovi. She'll be flying with Bon Jovi down to North Carolina, where she'll have a midnight rally to close out her campaign tonight. Back to you, Britt.
Jennifer, thank you. I guess there's nothing like celebrities to pack them in. Let's get some election eve thoughts now from our political panel, composed tonight of Rick Klein, political director at ABC News, and Jason Riley, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, who's also a member of the editorial board at the Wall Street Journal. So, Rick, what do you think?
I think that this is a surge of momentum for Hillary Clinton toward the end that I think is going to power her probably to victory. I think that you come down to the battleground states and you see them tipping in the same direction. I think there's a potential here for her to overperform even where we've seen the polls so far.
But our map tonight shows shifts that are 3 out of 4 of them are in his direction.
But those were states that he needed anyway, with the exception of Iowa, which I think is one of the shifts. I think
you think Iowa will flip?
I do. I think Iowa. I see Iowa and Ohio. I think that the Democratic base has been sufficiently scared into action in the last couple of days. And look, I don't want to preclude the possibilities here because I think they're real, and I think there still are Trump paths. It's just Hillary Clinton has far more of them.
Yeah, she has a number more. Jason, your thoughts?
I'm not sure Hillary has the momentum now. I think she has a lead to ward off Trump's momentum. I mean, but the fact that Hillary's in states like Michigan and Pennsylvania on the eve of the election, if you had asked her campaign 6 months ago if they, be in those states in the last night, they'd say, we'll be in trouble if we are. And they are. I mean, now she is going to go on to North Carolina later and close things out there, traditionally red state. But the idea that she is, doing some cleanup work here in some of these traditionally blue states that she thought she'd have in the bag by now, I think is signs that the momentum is really with Trump right now.
Well, I think she probably peaked a day or two ago, and the end of the FBI investigation probably helped to urge that along. And I think now it's about the day of voting states and running up a big score in places like Philadelphia. That's why you see the rally there. I look at some of the demographic groups in the early vote, and I look at some of the polling that's come out in just the last couple of days, and it seems to converge on seeing a coalition come together that's energized now about Hillary Clinton. This Latino vote, I think in Nevada in particular, down in Florida as well, an early vote. I think that could very easily be the story of the night.
Yeah, it does seem, Jason, that the Clinton campaign is banking on a big Latino turnout to overcome the fact that it doesn't have the enthusiasm and probably never could have had the enthusiasm that Barack Obama had from the African-American community.
Right. Blacks are about 12% of the turnout in 2012 and 13% in 2008. They're probably going to drop down to maybe 9-10% this go round. But as Rick said, she seems to be making it up with Hispanic voters pretty significantly in terms of their registration rates. They're just phenomenal at this point. And so, yes, I think she's trying to hold together that coalition. The other thing she's counting on, Britt, is enthusiasm among Democrats and the lack of enthusiasm for Trump. Romney had about 93% of Republican votes in 2012. Trump hasn't broken 90%.
That's right.
And that's a gap there in enthusiasm among Republicans for their nominee.
Yeah, a lot of the discussion about the tightening in the polls, Rick, has been that Republicans are coming home. Republicans coming home is not going to be enough because there are not enough of them. So the question arises, if he can't get above 90%, it does raise a question as to whether he can be elected.
They needed to come home weeks ago. And I think as a closing message, you needed them on board to reach. It's not just independent voters. It's also some of the subgroups of less likely voters. I think Trump has had moments here, and he still has a path. And I think the path that runs through the upper Midwest, I think the western states are probably gone, Colorado and Nevada. But I think the last possibility for him is some combination of a Pennsylvania and a Michigan. But then you look back down to Florida, and you say, look, if Hillary Clinton wins in Florida, it's over.
Yeah, we're rating that right now a flat-out toss-up.
Pure toss-up, as are we at ABC. Yeah, and I think that and North Carolina are clearly in that category. Either one of those goes to Hillary Clinton, and she's the president.
Yeah, we've just been talking in the last segment, as you probably heard with Scott Jennings about, earlier segment with Scott Jennings about, where do you look as a viewer on election night? First couple of places to look will be Florida and North Carolina, where the polls close at a pretty reasonable hour, and we'll have a chance to get a sense of it.
Yes, yeah.
The only question for me is, do they get called early? If they stay out there, even if it's not that close, it'll leave some suspense in the night.
Every election night I've ever covered, there's always some state which you expected to hear from early, and it'll be getting on toward midnight, and the race may have even been decided, and you still haven't heard from wherever it is. And no doubt there'll be one like that tomorrow. It'll be interesting to find out which one it is. Gentlemen, thank you. Don't go away. Right now, let's speed read some other news from the world of politics. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie says he doesn't know if the Bridgegate scandal cost him the vice presidential nomination. Today, he told CBS that he was runner-up to be Trump's VP, but he said Trump apparently thought Governor Mike Pence was a better choice. Last Friday, of course, Christie's former deputy chief of staff and a Port Authority executive were convicted in that Bridgegate political retaliation scandal. Christie maintains he has no memory of any of his aides telling him about the lane closures on the George Washington Bridge that caused those traffic jams. Former U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno has died. Relatives say she died early today of complications from Parkinson's disease. Reno was the first woman to serve as U.S. Attorney General, but also became the epicenter of several political storms during the Clinton administration. She served nearly 8 years and famously told reporters, quote, "I don't do spin." Janet Reno was 78. And Scooter Libby has gotten his law license back. The D.C. Court of Appeals has reinstated Vice President Cheney's former chief of staff to the bar. Back in 2007, Libby was convicted of lying and obstructing a leak investigation. The verdict culminated nearly a 4-year investigation into how CIA official Valerie Plame's name was leaked to reporters. Libby didn't do that, but he was disbarred in the District of Columbia soon after his conviction, but is now free to practice law again. And win or lose, there will be no Hillary Clinton fireworks over New York City tomorrow night. The campaign has reportedly called off a planned fireworks show over the Hudson River. No word on what sparked the change of plans. Both Clinton and Trump will be holding their election night events here in Manhattan. That will be the first time both presidential candidates have been in New York City on election night since. Today's batch of emails released by WikiLeaks show top Clinton aides worried about possible conflicts of interest with the Clinton Foundation. Fox News chief national correspondent Ed Henry reports. Ed?
Good to see you, Britt. Interesting because all these emails showing more angst within the campaign about what exactly was going on at the Clinton Foundation. What's significant is that even tonight, they can still accept foreign donations.
Just a small town girl.
As Hillary Clinton tries to put it all on the line to try and win the White House.
Tomorrow we face the test of our time.
New emails released by WikiLeaks show intense angst within the campaign about the future of the Clinton Foundation if she does get elected. One flashpoint in particular, whether the foundation should continue to take foreign donations. Clinton campaign manager Robbie Mook writing, quote, "From a purely political perspective, I would want to avoid any foreign money at all." While former President Bill Clinton recently said there'd be a ban on donations from foreign governments and companies if his wife wins, another new email from a top Clinton Global Initiative official suggested they could build a workaround to still let foreign money flow in. Quote, if corporate or individual or foreign sponsorship is precluded, is there an acceptable membership alternative for those organizations? And at what price does that fee become unacceptable? The emails also reveal some tension among Democrats over this question about mass incarceration.
A lot of folks in the black community blame the 1994 crime bill. Why should black people trust you this time to get it right? That's the question.
Well, Senator Sanders voted for it as well. Are you going to ask him the same question?
Answer the blog, who wrote to John Podesta, quote, why on earth did she say, are you going to ask Senator Sanders that question, instead of just addressing the issue? When she makes it about her, she loses the high ground, stating the obvious, I know, but she keeps doing it. That exchange may help explain an earlier WikiLeaks dump in which a Clinton aide called de Blasio a terrorist for waiting so long to endorse Clinton.
We need more love and kindness in America.
Other emails show that Clinton's closest aides were concerned the campaign lacked a central message more than a month after she announced her candidacy. Quote, she just did 2 local TV interviews, totally fine, no flags, but she still isn't pivoting back to why she's running or contrast with the Republicans. That came from Deputy Communications Director Christina Shockey in an email titled, Any Sign of the Retreat Memo? The memo she was referencing came days later. It shows just how worried staffers were early on. The memo's first question, what is the overarching vision that drives HRC's campaign?
Now, other new emails show DNC staffers prepping questions for CNN anchors getting ready to interview Republicans. CNN insists the DNC research did not drive their questions. A bigger problem tonight is another new email involving Donad Brazil, leaking yet another town hall question to the Clinton camp, a far bigger offense. Remember, previous collusion led to her being pushed out at the network. Brett?
Ed, thanks very much. And did CNN's relationship with the Democratic National Committee go beyond reporting? Starting next Monday, my friend Tucker Carlson will assume this seat as the anchor of a new 7 p.m. broadcast called Tucker Carlson Tonight. He joins me now. And who better to ask about what WikiLeaks has been revealing about the relationship of some journalists to the politicians they cover, and especially to the Clinton campaign. Tucker, what are you seeing out there on WikiLeaks?
It's well, you know, basically it confirms your darkest suspicions about the collusion between the press, some in the press, and the Clinton campaign. You're seeing, for example, we have a new one in today that shows in great detail the effect of Donad Brazil's famous email bragging that she gets the questions ahead of time from CNN.
And furnish them to the...
That's exactly right, to the Clinton campaign. And it turns out at this town hall event in Flint, Michigan, Hillary Clinton was asked a question that she was anticipating. So, of course, that's a massive advantage if you know what the question is going to be. But you're seeing this, you know, kind of across the board. Politico, a reporter there called Glenn Thrush,
who has been Glenn Thrush is a pretty big duke at Politico.
Oh, for sure, and writes the kind of, you know, big think analysis pieces after every primary and debate nights, and he's kind of the guy entrusted by his editors at Politico to tell America what to think about this, is revealed as someone who routinely sends his pieces over to the Clinton campaign, in effect for vetting. Now, there is some fine line here. I mean, you know, there are many times in the course, if you're a print person, that you would send a fact over and say, I just want to make certain this is true, and I think that's entirely legitimate. But to send a piece over and say, tell me what you think before it's printed does suggest a closeness that is unseemly, and by the way, discrediting to the rest of us. But maybe worst of all, in my view, is the behavior revealed of CNN, where apparently producers solicited questions from the Clinton campaign that a couple of their anchors were thinking about asking Donald Trump. Now, we should be clear, it's not at all known whether those anchors knew anything about it, and I happen to know both of them, and I think they're both good and honest people.
You know, I can remember back in the days when I did some debate moderating that you would get emails. I got emails and appeals. They were sometimes from special interest groups that wanted, you know, the rice subsidy question to be asked, or sometimes from other political organizations. They would come at you unsolicited to urge you to take up their issue in some way, or to ask a question they thought would help them. But this email says CNN is looking for questions. please send some topical, interesting ones, maybe a couple on Fiorina. This was for apparently an interview with Ted Cruz. So my thinking about that is that's new to me.
Well, it's odd behavior. Look, I hosted a show on CNN for years called Crossfire. It was a debate show. You're representing a side. We always got questions, for in my case from the RNC. You should say this, you should say that. I mean, first of all, it's entirely up to you whether to say it or not,
right.
But it's a debate show. These are CNN anchors who are supposed to be telling the news in a straight way. Now, there are two things to know here, I think. One, did CNN, which is, after all, a news organization, has it begun some kind of forensic deep dive into how this happened? And will they tell us about it? Are they transparent, which is always the question of the press? Are you as transparent as you require the rest of us to be? And the answer so far is no. And the second question is, did they do the same for Republicans? Did, they call over to the RNC or to the Trump campaign? We're going to talk to Hillary Clinton. What should we ask her? Somehow I suspect they didn't.
Donna Brazile, who famously forwarded bragged, as you pointed out, that she sometimes got CNN questions to be asked at debates and town halls ahead of time, and she passed them on. She was asked on a radio show today by a friendly host, what about that? And she said, if you had it to do over, what would you do? And she said, well, the first thing I would do is I would make sure that I knew a lot more about cyber security. And then she went off on the Russians, whom the Democrats consistently complain are behind these WikiLeaks the revelations. But she never said that she had to do over again. She wouldn't do it.
Well, that's been the gambit from the start, is to distract with this Russia stuff. And we don't know the truth about that. But here's the macro point, in my view, is that the press is being discredited by this kind of behavior. And when the smoke clears on Wednesday morning, it's going to find itself with fewer readers and viewers who believe what they're saying. It's going to find itself, in other words, with less power. And it's going to empower alternative media because people are you really going to believe a channel is colluding with the Clinton campaign? Probably not.
Tucker, great to have you here.
Thanks a lot.
Looking forward to your show, buddy.
I really appreciate it.
You bet. So now to the tight Senate races across the country. There are 34 seats up for grabs, and Democrats are expected to gain some seats. But the question remains, will they gain enough to retake the majority from the Republicans? Here to take us through some of those races is Chad Pergram, who covers Capitol Hill for Fox News on a day-to-day basis. Hi, Chad. Nice to have you on.
Thanks for having me. Good evening.
So what should I be looking for? We got, 24 seats in Republican hands that they have to defend, Democrats having to defend only 10. Take it from there.
That's the main thing here, is that the Republicans are playing defense at this point. And the reason is because of their success in 2010. Consider the fact that you had senators like Kelly Ayotte and Ron Johnson in Wisconsin and Pat Toomey. They all rode in on this anti-Obama, anti-Obamacare, pro-Tea Party wave in 2010. That doesn't exist right now. And the playing field in a presidential year in 2016 is very different than 2010. And that kind of puts the GOP at risk. The Democrats are really only having to defend one seat here, and that's in Nevada. Harry Reid is retiring. You have Joe Heck, the Republican congressman, running for the seat there against Catherine Cortez Masto. And that's really the only seat that Republicans can try to add to their majority if they're able to retain their majority.
Right. So, and it looks to me, just we're looking at the average of the polls out there, it looks like the Democrat Cortez Masto is ahead, but by 0.4 of a point or something like that. So that looks that race looks like a total toss-up. Where else are you looking, Chad?
Well, I would look at North Carolina. That's a tough one right there. North Carolina is a seat that always goes the way the presidential race goes. North Carolina has only split its ballots between the president and the Senate once. That was 1968 when it voted for Nixon and then voted for Sam Ervin, who, of course, then investigated Richard Nixon, chairing the Watergate Committee. Another wild card is Missouri. Roy Blunt is a Republican senator, first term, used to be the whip in the House. He is up against Democrat Jason Kander. Nobody probably a year ago could imagine that Roy Blunt would be in worse shape at this point in the election cycle than, say, Rob Portman, another Republican who's up this year in Ohio. Keep in mind that Roy Blunt has had a precedent for losing tough races before, and that was when he was the whip. John Boehner came out of nowhere to beat him for the majority leader race when Tom DeLay went away.
This is when he was in the House. I'm looking at the polling average out there, and he appears to be ahead by a point, just over a point. And it strikes me that it's particularly interesting that he would be in trouble out there because that is one state where the Senate candidate is running well behind Donald Trump, who looks as if he's going to win that state pretty easily. So one wonders what were the ingredients of Roy Blunt getting in trouble.
Part of the criticism is that he's been in Washington too long, that he's an insider. And at the end of the day, Democrats, just by putting this race on the field, it forces the Republicans to spend money there when maybe they can't spend it in Wisconsin or spend it in Florida. That's another key point here. Looking at recruiting coups by the Republicans. In Florida, Marco Rubio getting him to run again. And then Indiana, Evan Bayh, the Democrat.
Yeah, Evan Bayh, of course, is the former senator from that state, former governor. His father was a senator and governor. Well-known political family out there, but he lived in Washington, right? So very quickly, I think he got himself in a little trouble by not being enough of a Hoosier.
Absolutely, and that's the criticism against him. But just the fact that Democrats were able to make that a competitive seat here and put that on the board when it was expected to be a cakewalk for Todd Young, the Republican congressman a couple months ago, that's a big deal, and that might be the difference if the Democrats do in fact take the Senate by one seat.
Yeah, we're taking a look at it now. Todd Young ahead by 0.7 of a point in the average, so that's not much. Chad, thank you very much.
Anytime.
Bill O'Reilly says one state is the key to Donald Trump winning the White House. Which state is it? Bill is here next to tell you, plus FBI Director James Comey has been accused of interfering with the presidential election. What does the White House think about all that? That's
was today. Hillary Clinton is having a big event. We're going to show you a little bit on the factor in a few minutes in Philadelphia. It's got Bruce Springsteen, she's got President Obama, she's got Michelle Obama, and John Bon Jovi. Look at them. They're having a great time. But what people don't know is in Philadelphia, if you don't vote, they're going to come to your house, drag you out, because that's the whole ball game. If she gets a high turnout in Philadelphia, Hillary Clinton wins the state. If she doesn't, and the African Americans don't come out, then Trump, I think, is going to win.
What about the Philadelphia suburbs, which have been considered pivotal? That's where the soccer moms were supposed to have
Bucks County.
Yeah, exactly. What about that? What's your thoughts about that?
You know, it's hard to really put a label on that. I think that it's a more liberal area, the conservative area. The further west you get more conservative. The further north you get. That's why Trump was in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, because, those people need jobs up there. So I think all things considered, Hillary Clinton will win Pennsylvania if the turnout for African Americans is 85% of what it was for Barack Obama. If it slips under that number, I think Trump's got a good chance.
Yeah, you don't really have the kind of Hispanic presence in that state that you do in some of the other critical battleground
Florida.
states.
The battle for Hispanics in Florida is so intense because the Dade County Cuban population tends to be more conservative than the Orlando Puerto Rican community, right. and it's a brawl. This is why the election tomorrow, the returns, are going to be very interesting to watch, because it is just an absolute hand-to-hand combat brawl to get people out.
Well, and of course, if Florida goes to Hillary,
it's over.
Yeah, I think it's probably over.
And North Carolina too.
You think the same?
North Carolina.
What do you think about North Carolina?
Well, right now, you got to say Hillary Clinton's the favorite to win. I can't make a prediction. I'm going to make some predictions on the factor tonight, but I can't make a prediction on this, because here's the wild card that I don't know about. The Trump people believe, and I think that there's a little nervousness in the Clinton machine too, that there are people who don't respond to polling. It's like you call them up and they hang up, they hate you, all right, who are going to vote for Trump. So they're unpollable people, and there's a lot of them, they think. White people, working class, and they're going to come out en masse for Trump. That's what they're pinning their hopes on.
That's kind of an interesting paradox about that, because the Trump people that I hear from, and I hear from a certain number of them, they can't wait to tell you how much they're for him, how much they care, how much they believe in him, and yet they're reticent when it comes to pollsters. That's interesting.
Well, the media just have to be involved with that basic establishment, polling, press, complex. New York Times, Washington Post. So these are the people that when you do exit polling, they blow you right off. They're not going to stop and talk to you. I'm out of there. But the Trump people believe there's a lot of them. Yeah. And they may be right, because Michigan, why is Hillary Clinton competing in Michigan? She should have that state won. Right. But she has to compete there. Same thing in New Hampshire. So that's it. If there are a bunch of people who hate the establishment and they all come out to vote for Trump, that's what they're pinning their hopes on.
Bill, good to have you.
All right, now you don't get sunburned.
I'll be watching your predictions tonight.
Okay, don't get sunburned down there in Boca Grande, a swell place. And
all right,
you're still going to do the factor once in a while.
You bet I will.
All right.
On Election Day Eve, the White House has reacted to yesterday's FBI announcement from Director James Comey, and we'll have that reaction next. The White House said today that President Obama continues to have confidence in FBI Director James Comey and does not believe Mr. Comey intended to advantage any political candidate in the conduct of his investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. This after Mr. Comey announced yesterday that his off, then on again investigation was once more off again. Presidential Press Secretary Josh Earnest did note, however, that Comey's recent actions have been at the center of the campaign in the past 10 days. Our nightly political panelists back. Rick Klein, political director at ABC News, and Jason Riley, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and a member of the Wall Street Journal's editorial board. Well, let's talk about this question. Comey's motivations. Now, we've had these 3 episodes. There's some history with Comey going back a way. Is he trying to be a straight shooter here? Is he protecting his own hindquarters? What do you think, Jason?
I think Jim Comey's out for me. I mean, he is in a jam. Hundreds of emails dumped on him, possibly related to an investigation that he had already closed. He was in a jam. He had to do something. But he's in a jam because of his previous actions. He has no one to blame here.
I mean, because
himself.
Because he came out and announced last summer that he'd basically concluded the investigation and made public, very rare, his prosecutorial recommendation.
Almost unheard of. It's not his job to do running commentary on the nature of his investigation. He's supposed to investigate, then turn the information over to the Justice Department.
Rick?
And I agree with that, and I think what's telling here is that he wasn't able to review the emails before going out with that letter of 10 days ago. I think he was concerned about people in his own office leaking or people on the Hill leaking what they were hearing and letting them know about the existence of the investigation, because I think the rational thing to do, or the reasonable thing to do, if you don't want to interfere with politics, is to take a look at what you have before you put out any letter at all. We may not have ever gotten a letter, much less 2, toward the end if they had done the review, gotten the court order, done the review, and then figured out what they had.
And it seems like what happened is once they had gotten this thing underway, they had to boil down the 650,000 to just those that were addressed to or from Hillary Clinton, and then examine them. And it was like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for what, a week and 3 days.
And not only that, they had to do it in the spotlight of Democrats pressuring them and criticizing them to death over meddling in the last days of a campaign, including criticism from the president himself. So he was under a tremendous amount of pressure.
Given the fact that he did what he originally did, which was to make the big announcement at the news conference last July, I guess it was, did everything in your judgment, Rick, as Jason suggested, sort of flow from that he sort of painted himself into a situation where he couldn't not tell the Hill both what he thought he might have and then what he ended up not having?
That makes the most sense to me, but I think, again, it reflects something that's going on in his own office, that he wasn't confident enough that he could do that review in private without seeing it go out publicly in this extraordinary series of events.
Well, there was that moment after his initial press conference when he was called to testify on the Hill, and Lamar Smith of Texas, member of the committee, said, if I know the investigation is now closed or finished, completed, I think was the word that was used. If something turns up that suggests that you might have to go back into this, will you let us know? That was not the exact wording of the question. And he said yes. Was he then more or less bound to tell Congress when it started?
Probably. I mean, what we've learned here is that there's a lot of disarray within the FBI, within the Justice Department, not only with regard to the email investigation, but with regard to the Clinton Foundation as well. There's just a lot of disorganization going on.
Well, we got about 25 seconds left for this last question. So what, in your assessment, was his motivation in the first place of going out and taking it on himself to announce a prosecutorial recommendation that he knew was going to be followed and making it public?
I think he was trying to play it straight in a situation that was never going to be you could never play like that. It was already crooked.
Right. Got it. Okay, gentlemen, thanks very much for being here. Coming up, a final round of tweets, some of them mean, but not all. Time now for a final round of mostly mean tweets before Tucker Carlson comes and takes over. Joe Petralia said, sorry to see you go, but the 70s called. They want their clothes back, and don't leave any bad habits behind for Tucker Carlson. I'll try not to, sir. Brian Lang tweeted, Britt, some of your suits look like the burlap bags I put on my bushes for the wintertime, but you're a good man and you will be missed. Jim DeFrank said, you may not agree with Mr. Hume's opinions, but I can't ever remember seeing him when he hasn't looked dapper. Well, thank you for that, Jim. Brooke Smith DiCaprio tweeted, Britt, you handsome devil, I love your wasp chic look. Great style and no-nonsense reporting go hand in hand. Cheers to retirement. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Excuse me. Jeff Grolick said, Brett, I remember when you and Peter Jennings were the hot new reporters on black and white TV. I've gone colorblind. You now look mostly normal. Dwight Heath, too, tweeted, I shall miss you as you leave the program. I just turned 69, but I remember my grandma telling about your first show. You're a pro. And finally, Cherokee Shaman, too, said, Britt Hume, you old fart, thanks for filling in for Greta. I'm glad to see Tucker Carlson getting your gig. Have a Coke, a smile, and play golf. I'm planning on it. Thanks to everyone who tweeted or emailed their feedback over the past 2 months. I've enjoyed it all, the good, the bad, and the sometimes ugly. That is about it for us tonight, but stay tuned for the O'Reilly Factor, in which, as you heard, Bill will give us his intrepid forecast for the big day tomorrow. In the meantime, we leave you, as always, with our political quote of the day, which has widely been attributed to Thomas Jefferson. It seems appropriate for this election eve. Quote, we in America do not...